What is important and why I think Congress should really care, NF biology has high overlaps with cancer biology. So what we discover in NF and the drugs we bring are potentially drugs that can help cancer patients.
I want to urge everybody to resist the reflex that we all have when it comes to anything related to politics. When we're looking at things as critical as medical research and impacting people's lives, we have to look at it objectively. Congress is set to cut over $850 million medical research dollars. It's not a good thing. It's something that we need to push back against and push members of Congress, leadership in particular, to correct and to fix as quickly as possible. Let's dive right into this important topic. Last week, Congress passed a stopgap funding bill. Everyone saw it, the continuing resolution. One of the elements of the CR was to slash a key Pentagon-backed medical research program called the CDMRP, Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program, by 57%. That's $859 million of its total budget. Now, they didn't specify how it should be cut, if it should be cut across the board or if there should be specific programs cut, but it will be cut nonetheless, or unless something changes. A memo was then issued with specific programs that'll be cut all the way to zero and some that'll be cut just a little bit less. And it's not what you think. This is not really a DOGE effort. This is just cutting spending to get the dollars down. And I think that's a critical distinction that all of us need to pay attention to. All conservatives and really most Americans are for cutting spending, cutting waste, balancing our budget if possible, or getting as close to it as possible here in the United States. We have to be careful when that is being done, especially on things like medical research, cancer, rare disease, and other diseases, that critical research that's being funded through the government. Just to cut it willy-nilly one day to the next is very, very problematic. And honestly, I am an optimist, and I think things can still be fixed, whether it's by putting things back into the funding of the CDMRP or by funding it somewhere else like NIH. Let's dive into it a little bit today. I know this is a different topic than what we usually talk about. Usually we talk about sort of bigger policy issues and discussions that are happening, but I think sometimes we can lose the trees for the forest, the opposite of the general expression, whereas we make these cuts that are important for the budget and for the economy, critical, we have to make them, but you can't make those cuts on topics like medical research, on issues like medical research, just straight across the board. You have to see what's being cut and how it will impact people's lives. In particular, one of the line items that's close to my heart is the neurofibromatosis research program. I serve as the chair of the board for an organization called the Children's Tumor Foundation. We're involved in educating and providing research to find treatments and a cure to neurofibromatosis, to NF. It's a disease that causes tumors to grow throughout your body, particularly on nerves throughout your body. It's very complex. It's genetic. There's lots of research regarding gene editing and things of that nature to try to cure the disease, but lots of treatments and research about understanding what makes these tumors grow. To be clear, there is no disclaimer here on CTF, Children's Tumor Foundation. We do not get money from the federal government. That money goes straight to research, but our foundation is involved in making sure that those and so many other dollars go to the right place in advancing science. Now, there's actually three types of NF, NF1, NF2, and NF2-related schwannomatosis. NF1, which is the most common, is characterized by the growth of tumors. They call them benign tumors. I hate that term benign because there's nothing benign about them. They're not cancerous, but if God forbid you have tumors growing into your brain or into your spine or anywhere else in a critical nerve, there's nothing benign about it. There's also skin changes. You've seen so many images in pop culture of people with their faces covered with tumors. That's NF1. It's also learning disabilities and also different issues like severe scoliosis. Patients with NF1 are at higher risk of developing malignant tumors called MPNSTs, which can become cancerous. NF2 focuses more on the vestibular nerve, which leads to hearing loss, like McKinnon, who's coming on, and other neurological issues. And it's really just a difficult thing. But the only hope for families, mine included, is continued research and moving the ball forward. One of the most critical things that the Children's Tumor Foundation does, CTF does, is to make sure that every minute of research that's being done anywhere in the world advances the science forward towards a treatment or a cure or understanding. Meaning, if someone's already done that research and failed, we'll know about it and we'll make sure that they know so they don't do it again. And if someone's done it and succeeded, we'll make sure they know so they can continue to move the ball forward. For decades, the Department of Defense has funded NF research, partly because of its direct relevance to military medicine. It's a question that many people have, why the Department of Defense funds medical research. There's been discussions, rumblings, rumors of moving it over to NIH. I'm very supportive of that, but you can't cut these research programs and then just try to turn them on a couple of years later in another agency. That's just not how it works. The CDMRP, this program, the reason it exists is to fill gaps in medical research funding, particularly in underfunded diseases or specific health challenges, including those affecting military personnel. And that's really an important element that I wanted to share with you. When you're talking about rare diseases like NF, it's not that there's a whole line of pharmaceutical companies trying to do basic science research to understand NF tumors. It's up to the government and to nonprofits to take the ball and really understand the science, to be able to get the science ready to become translational to treatments and to ultimately a cure. And that's what the money that comes from the CDMRP, it's $25 million out of $1.5 billion that goes to NF. It seems like a drop in the bucket. I don't want to be disrespectful. It's a lot of money for anyone, for any government entity, for any individual. But in the scheme of things, it seems absolutely critical. This program, CDMRP, was funded or established in 1992 to address these medical challenges and aims to provide innovative and high-risk research that could lead to breakthroughs in treatment and prevention. And if it sounds like I just said that, it's because it's entirely consistent with what the NF community does and how we use that money for NF research through the CDMRP. Now, I said earlier that a memo came out about how these programs should be cut, how to get to the 57% cut of the $1.5 billion through the CR. That memo zeroed out the NF program to zero, from 25 million to zero. Research stops, pencils down. Now, what people don't understand is you can't just turn it back on in a year. I mean, we'll try if we have to. But the problem is organizations like the CTF, Children's Tumor Foundation, spend thousands of dollars and many years trying to encourage people from the science community, from the research community, to get involved in researching our rare disease. And once we get them, part of it is you're going to make a difference. You're going to do research that impacts, that moves the ball forward. And there's funding available. We'll help you get funding from the federal government. That is the partnership that we have created. And all of that is at risk because these guys, if they don't get funded, they will move on to another project. And it has been successful. That's a very important part. Many people are saying, well, is it efficient? How are they spending the money? Those are fair questions. And I urge anyone from leadership that's listening, any policy expert who is listening, to take a deep dive in the NF research program and see that it is an example of efficiency. It's an example of success. The cost of trials is far less than any other program. The success, the level of success is high. It's helped lead to 2 FDA-approved drugs, over 60 clinical trials, advancements in cancer, neurology, orthopedics. It's just unbelievable what our program, the NF program, I say our program, because I'm part of that NF community, has been able to accomplish. It's not something that should be cut. But there's still time to fix this. Government is moving very fast, which is a great thing, but it's time to fix what's happening. We can do it. We urge members of the Congress, the leadership, to make a change. Department of Defense, if it comes to your desk, it's important to look line item by line item and look at the NF line item and look at what is an example of efficiency, of a program that meets the goals of the CDMRP, that advances the science in a field that is not otherwise well-funded and that will impact the lives positively of over 167,000 Americans directly and millions more indirectly. Today, we're going to learn a little bit more about this issue, shine a light on some of these cuts. We're going to hear from the CEO of the Children's Tumor Foundation, Annette Bakker, one of the most impressive women I've ever met and I've had the opportunity to work with for almost a decade on this issue, to understand more about this research and what's being done. And then NF, rare genetic disease, 1 in 2,000 people have it, over 167,000 Americans. But what is it? We're going to hear from a friend of mine, McKinnon Galloway. McKinnon is actually deaf. She lost her hearing as a result of a tumor that was removed. She suffers from a life full of tumors, but really is also just an incredible person, incredible advocate for her community, for our community, for so many things that are good in the world. And she proves and shows just through her actions every day that we shouldn't let things get us down, even difficult things. We can still push forward, not just succeed, but inspire other people. And that really is the face of the NF community. So I'm excited to have them both today. This is Standpoint, and I'm Gabe Groisman. Before we get started, I want to take a minute to thank our newest sponsor, CUFI, Christians United for Israel. The landscape in the Middle East is reshaping before our eyes. Blink and you'll miss something. What happens there impacts us all. And at the center of it all, of course, is the state of Israel. Our U.S. government's policies towards the Middle East have never been more important, and the time period never more filled with potential and fraught with peril. Israel's enemies are America's enemies, and the terror organizations determined to annihilate Israel have the same plans for us here in the U.S. And they're going to fail both over there and over here. But Christians United for Israel is America's largest pro-Israel organization. They are leading the charge to help keep America on the right side of God and history. This summer, join me as I join thousands of pro-Israel Americans at the 20th annual CUFI Washington Summit from June 29th through July 1st. While you're there, learn from leading policymakers and Middle East experts and make your voices heard on Capitol Hill. Do not be a bystander. Register for the 20th annual CUFI Washington Summit today at cufi.org, that's CUFI.org, with promo code Standpoint25. Standpoint25 is the promo code, and be a part of a movement that is at the forefront of history. Annette Bakker, CEO of Children's Tumor Foundation, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here with you, Gabe.
Annette, it's incredible to talk to you on the show being recorded. Actually, it's a little bit strange because we speak on the phone so very often, trying to solve for some of the more complicated problems in the world, a side that people don't see of me too often, something more private. But with the Children's Tumor Foundation, the two of us work together to find treatments and ultimately a cure to NF, neurofibromatosis. I already explained to the audience a little bit about what that is. But Annette, give us a little bit about your background. Who are you?
First of all, I'm really happy to be here with you. I'm a pharmacologist by training. I was about 10 years in academia, then about 20 years in pharma, and then I understood, in fact, how different the academic and the industry enterprise were and how disconnected they were. And I joined the Children's Tumor Foundation in the hope to be able to bring the science to better treatments for patients in a very efficient way. And I think over all those years, also with you as a board chair, Gabe, I think we've made quite some strides in the right direction. And I always say CTF's definition is efficiency.
Yeah, and it's funny, we have a goal that we speak about often, which is our goal is not to exist in 10 years because we were able to solve for this problem and find a treatment to NF. Of course, it's aspirational, but if we don't aspire to anything, then what are we gonna do? We spoke a little bit about the cuts, which is really the purpose of doing this episode, just to highlight sometimes when cuts are made quickly, the mistakes that are made. You know, I gave sort of the big picture on the 57% and how it was cut. Our program for now, it looks like it may have been cut to zero. I'm optimistic there's still time, but I also suffer from an optimistic bias in life in general, that things are going to be fixed when the right people hear about what's happening, which is part of what we're doing here today. Things will be fixed. But can you tell us a little bit more about the money that's doled out by the American taxpayers through the CDMRP for the NF program in particular? Where does that money go? What happens with those 25 million?
Yeah. So maybe before I go into the specific 25 million, I think what we have been doing really well as an NF community is to come together as funders. And in fact, every individual funder, whether it's a private funder or a public funder, being the CDMRP and being the NIH, is that we have built really a network of interconnected funders to make sure that we spend both taxpayer and donor dollars the most efficient. The way we have done that is, for example, CTF would give relatively small grants to very innovative, but a little bit crazy ideas to create the preliminary data set to then go submit those grants to what I call the people with more money, which was CDMRP and the NIH, and in fact to increase the chance of our research community to de-risk the idea and then get a bigger pot of money to really explore the idea. And then we would come back in when we have a pretty good team now of drug discoverers that would say, okay, now this has been discovered. How can we turn this into a treatment? And then treatment would be discovered through funding of the Children's Tumor Foundation and the other private funders. And then at the end of the road, there is a very efficient clinical trials consortium that was run and paid for by the CDMRP that would then pick up the drugs again and run them through the clinical trials consortium. So the importance of this cut of CDMRP and also the cut of NIH is that we have kind of lost a partner in the route from the moment you have discoveries, how do you quickly turn them into treatments? And so the disaster is more that we have lost partners that are really essential in getting discoveries and translate them into treatments.
Yeah, and that's an important point, and also help us understand a little bit. I talked about it a little bit in the intro, but about what role the funding that the government plays. What happens if that's gone, right? Who's going to be able to fill that gap? Are there other entities looking to fund this sort of basic research that the government was funding? And then we'll get to the clinical trials after. But just the main part, the meat and potatoes of the $25 million, the main part of the money that was being funded was scientific research towards NF. Where's the interest? Is there a private sector that's interested in funding this? Where do we go from here?
Well, the problem that we have is that as long as you have tangible targets, tangible mechanisms that you can discover drugs for, the private sector cannot come in. They are not going to invest in a rare disease they may have never heard of unless there is a tangible thing that actually can be done. So that route up to the pharma companies and to the private companies is essential in order to bring these discoveries to the companies and say, do you have drugs for this? And we are very much also into looking of which drugs already exist that can benefit our NF patients. Can we make those drugs better? Can we discover new drugs? Can we do gene therapy? But all that requires an injection of money that is, I think, really important that the government is behind that, because what is important and why I think Congress should really care is because NF biology has high overlaps with cancer biology. So what we discover in NF and the drugs we bring are potentially drugs that can later on also help cancer patients. And I'm not saying that like that. What they call hotspot mutations, which are really important mutations in the cancer field, a lot of them are either NF1 or NF2 or the schwannomatosis genes. So this is a disease area that government should not ignore, because we should be an integral part of the cancer community. And the other thing why I think NF is so incredibly important to keep funding is because biomarkers is a big challenge. You can plaster my house with discovered biomarkers, but there are very few that are actually being used in the clinic. And those very few
explain what a biomarker is, sorry.
Okay, so a biomarker is an indicator of disease. Insulin is a biomarker for sugar in diabetes patients. Cholesterol is an indicator for cardiac problems if your cholesterol is too high. In cancer, you have blood markers, and some people have maybe heard of prostate-specific antigen, which is used to discover prostate cancer. There is also one for ovarian cancer. There are a few for breast cancer, but there are very few in the clinic, because it is really looking for a needle in a haystack if you have a healthy patient that suddenly is there and has cancer. There is no intermediate. The NF patients have tumors that we follow day in, day out, because these tumors should be followed in the patients. We can use these tumors that potentially, and it's not a high percentage, but there is a small percentage of these tumors that turn malignant, but we know where to look. So the biomarkers that we invent and that we discover, we don't invent them, we discover them in the NF patients, can be hugely important for the cancer research. Because I think with the current treatments that we have available for cancer patients, we will need biomarkers like you have no idea.
And just to break it down for us non-scientists and non-doctors, and Annette, if I'm wrong, you could tell me, just tell me nicely. But is that, if you can understand, you can sort of predict the future of a patient based on science, based on the biomarkers that you can find, you can know how to treat them. So if you're talking about cancer, the cancer cells, it's not just one cell that's all made the same. It's all made of lots of different types, different pieces. You can take them, understand what it's made out of, understand the genetic makeup. People now with cancer are getting gene testing that's new in the last few years to try to understand more way medicine is going, is you're trying to understand more. In the rare disease community, when we're talking about things like NF, it's even more marked. It's even more important, more critical, because so much less is understood about it. And there's so much variation between the experience of someone, person A and person B with NF1, NF2, or schwannomatosis, all these different variants. And within each variant, it's totally different. So if we can find markers that we can find that can tell us this is going to be aggressive, it's going to grow, the chances of being cancerous are very high, you're going to treat most of these children, because you find out when they're younger, you're going to treat them very differently than someone who has biomarkers that show sort of an easier path, an easier life forward. You're not going to be as aggressive. You're going to learn a little bit more. I get that right?
Completely. You got it completely right. And there is one other thing that I wanted to mention why biomarkers are going to be so important. A lot of people probably know that 30 years ago, when I started in the cancer field, we were treating patients with very aggressive treatments that were just killing every dividing cell, right? They were very aggressive. People would lose their hair, would have horrible diarrhea. It was horrible. What we have now is we have been very good in developing, as a community, in developing what they call targeted therapies, very specific. And that is why we're able now to help so many more cancer patients than before. The challenge that we have is that if you have these very specific treatments, now you need very specific indicators to say this patient gets treated with this patient gets treated with that, this patient gets treated with that. Here we need to combine. So that is why biomarkers are going to be drivers for oncology decision making. But we need to bring these biomarkers all the way to the decision point. And I think NF is a huge opportunity to act here as a helper for cancer research. And that is why I think Congress should care, because this is a disease like some of the other rare benign tumor conditions. Congress should really look carefully at those because they matter for cancer.
Yeah, and they matter for the 167,000 plus people who have them. And I said it earlier, I hate the term benign when they're talking about tumors that are non-cancerous tumors. Benign means good, right?
I agree.
Opposite,
I hate them
malignant, which
too.
means bad. And there's nothing good about these tumors, but I know you're using the term technically. Help us also understand, and that if the researchers are not funded from the $25 million, I made a statement earlier that they'll move on to other research. Is that right?
Well, that is the risk, right? There is a researcher. I was a researcher for a long time before myself, and research is not a job. Research is a mission. It's like a monk, right? You dive in, you want to fix this problem, you want to solve this problem, you work over the weekend, you work 24 hours. So if you are treating researchers like any other job, we will lose the good researchers. And the problem is that it's very hard to get these people back. They will jump off the ship and then that's it. And there is also another community, which are the younger researchers that really depend for their PhDs, for their postdocs. They don't have, unless they can go back to their parents, but a lot of them will have to go look for other jobs if they're not funded anymore. So I think where the risk is that if I came to America, is because I was so impressed with medical research here. We cannot lose that position. We are the prime example of medical and scientific research. Are there some inefficiencies? Absolutely. But I think we should fix the inefficiencies, but I don't think we can just blow it up, because then we risk putting throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We just have to be very careful with that.
Yeah, I want to urge everybody to resist the reflex that we all have today when it comes to anything related to politics. There's always a reflex, and the reflex is the following. If you're a Republican, if you're conservative like I am, you say, okay, the government's doing it, it's probably good. And you don't want to kind of question it. If you're a Democrat, you want to be oppositional, and everything that the party does, that the administration does, you want to say is bad. It's the worst thing in the world. You don't analyze it. You just react as an oppositionalist. We can't do either of those things when we're looking at things as critical as medical research and impact people's lives. We have to look at it objectively and calmly and with a fine-tooth comb and say, is this good or is this bad? Is this going to impact people's lives? There's a big discussion, a big political discussion to be had of whether or not this should be funded. This and other medical research should be funded in the Department of Defense. I'm glad to have that conversation with anyone, any day of the week. It's an interesting philosophical discussion. From where I sit, and I'm not speaking for Annette or the foundation, I don't care where this is funded within the federal government. It makes sense. NIH seems to make more sense from a big picture perspective. It's a health agency. But wherever it's funded, it can be funded. But what's important is that it is funded and that there are no gaps in the funding. Because when there's gaps in the funding, you turn off the lights. It's not that everyone's sitting in the room waiting for a year or 2 years for you to turn the lights back on. We're going to turn the lights back on. The room will be empty and the science will be held back for so many years. So that's my opinion on this, and something that is so important that I dedicated an episode of the podcast to. Annette, before I turn it over to our next guest, is there anything else you want to share that I missed?
No, I think the only most important thing, and I completely share with you, Gabe, we have to stay united to tackle disease. Disease is not affecting one other than a different one. We all get affected by disease sooner or later. And let's just make sure that we stay united. And we are at the Children's Tumor Foundation. And I'm really happy for that.
You can visit the Children's Tumor Foundation at ctf.org. Learn more about us. Of course, ctf.org/donate. I'm pretty sure is our donate page. That's not what this is about. But if you'd like to, go ahead, learn more about what we're doing. If you want to support, just fantastic. Now, everybody's been listening. For those of you still listening, this is a special episode. We're going to have two guests on this episode. And we're going to have our friend McKinnon Galloway, a friend of the foundation, a friend of our families, a personal friend. McKinnon has an incredible story, an incredible journey, a beautiful young woman from North Carolina
Right,
who's just living her life. And when she was a teenager, got hit in the head, I think with the volleyball, went and got a scan, found some tumors in her brain and did some genetic testing and found out she had NF. She actually has NF2. We talked about the different forms of NF, and she's led quite a journey. So, she's going to talk about it now when she comes on the show. But I want to help everyone understand what is NF. She's actually completely deaf, which is very interesting for the podcast. She'll be reading transcriptions. She's fantastic. She's really smart and sharp and sweet. And she's going to show everybody a little bit the face of NF and the courage of the NF fighters and how she continues to live her life, which is what our NF fighters do, our NF heroes do. Annette Bakker, thanks so much for joining us.
Have a great day. Thanks, Gabe.
McKinnon Galloway, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
So McKinnon, I just gave you a little intro before you jumped on the show. I was talking to Annette Bakker, our mutual friend, the CEO of the Children's Tumor Foundation. We've spoken a lot on the show so far today. I know you haven't heard it, about cuts and research on NF and the importance of the research, etc., what the foundation does. All of that we can put aside now for the rest of the show, because what I really wanted, I was so excited that you agreed to join. We've been speaking about this rare disease called NF, neurofibromatosis, which is a group of 3 diseases, NF1, 2, and schwannomatosis or disorders. And it just sounds like a complicated word that's hard for people to say, but it's something that over 167,000 Americans live with, including you. And you're a good friend. You're someone I admire so much, the way you live your life, your resilience, your happiness, your joy, your strength. And just wanted to share your story with the world.
So I got diagnosed with NF2 when I was 16. I went in for a routine MRI from a sports concussion, and they said, I have 2 brain tumors, and then I'm going to go deaf. I had to go through high school. This is 16 years ago, so you're still like in the process of really figuring out what is going on. And we've done a lot of research since then. They ended up doubling in size in 6 months, so I had to start on chemotherapy, and then it was, first brain surgery, second brain surgery, other chemotherapy, immunotherapy, third brain surgery. And then that brain surgery, that was in 2022, that I completely lost my hearing. And it was definitely very tough because at the time when I went for the surgery, my eye had rolled inwards as well. And so I couldn't hear and I couldn't really see. So it's definitely like a really big struggle on, my eye has rolled back, which is, a miracle. But then the end of 2023, we had to go in for another surgery because the third one was so successful. And I had a cerebral stroke on this side, and my face went completely paralyzed on this side. So it's definitely been a big, huge journey. I'm just, kind of making it through and pushing forward.
It's definitely been a journey of pushing forward. I just wanted to explain a little bit to those. Some people watch, some people listen. I urge everybody to watch this one. Go on Rumble or on YouTube to watch this one, so you get to see the amazing, beautiful McKinnon and her smile, her energy, going through all this, describing even her life's journey, just always with a sense of reality, but also positivity that's infectious and important for everyone to soak up a little bit. But McKinnon, you've been involved in the NF community, with the people that live with NF all over the country for so many years. Tell me a little bit about the NF community. What do you see about when you meet other kids, other people with NF? What are the common strands that you see when meeting someone with NF?
So this is probably going to be different, but a lot of NF people feel this way. Is for a long time when I was diagnosed, I was scared to get involved in the community because it was very and a lot of us feel this way. It's very scary seeing what could happen in the future. But when I started getting involved in that community, they are some of the most amazing individuals I have ever met. Their resiliency is just incredible. And the support that's there is just out of this world. I'm so lucky to have that support because when I really needed it, they were there and they understood. So we're kind of, it's kind of like going to war. We're all in this battleground together. So we share something that no matter what happens, we're all there together. And, if I get bad news and people find out I'm in a community, next thing I know, I have 100 text messages of how are you doing? What's going on? And we all check on each other, which is really great. So the support is just outstanding with them.
Yeah, I find the same thing. Anytime I meet someone with NF, I find someone with a tremendous amount of resilience and strength. And I love in our community, we call them NF fighters or NF heroes. And those are tags that don't even seem to be sufficient, not even enough when you meet some of these people, not just kids who live their lives with this disease, which was a disorder which does not have a cure at the moment, but there are some treatments, some medications that don't work for everybody. What are you comfortable sharing with McKinnon as far as your journey from a medical perspective? People call these benign tumors, which drive me crazy. I've mentioned it a couple times because there's nothing benign about them. But what else can you share about your journey?
There's a lot of layers to this. It is a nerve disorder in general, which means that it's very painful. So the nerves, they grow. The tumors, they grow into the nerve, shutting the nerve off, and they grow outwards, pushing on things they're not supposed to. I have 2 in my brain, 6 in my spine, a few in my hand, and I think I have a new one in my calf. So it's just constantly monitoring, if you're not in the doctor's office of the brain, you're in the doctor's office of your leg, you're in the doctor's office of the hand, you're always in the doctor's office. And one of the things that's really hard about these tumors is because there's no cure, you can't just go in and take out the tumor and then you're good to go. You really have to monitor, okay, we're going to take a little bit of this out to reduce the pressure, but then we're going to monitor it because we can't take it all the way out or we're going to cut your hearing. There's always a loss that's involved with it. And some of the nerves end up wanting they do turn cancer. So it's not just, it's kind of like this tricky monitoring that we go through all the time that a lot of us honestly end up living in the hospital for a lot of the time. My nurses are also my family because I know them. I'll go in and I'll be how's this going? And it's it's not oh, you give blood drawn. It's you have that connection with them as well.
Yeah. And, there's a saying in the NF community that you may have NF, but NF doesn't have you. And I think you embody that when you had to have the surgery that ended up saving your life, but resulting in you losing your hearing or having your hearing taken from you. You went through the physical struggles of that. I've watched that carefully and closely as a friend, a friend of yours and of your whole family's, but also watched something incredible happen, which really I think is, I'm almost not surprised by it because of who you are and how I've watched you over the years. But you started documenting your journey of becoming deaf, of going deaf, and somehow you grew this tremendously big social media following of people just following you on your journey and you teaching people sign language and showing deaf technology, different deaf tech, and trying to help other kids and people that are living in that space. Tell us a little bit about that journey for you.
A lot of chief people say it because a lot of us lose our hearing is we say, we're always in the room but never part of the conversation. And so I started researching technology for about 3 hours a night on deaf technology. I was there has to be some way, to kind of have this connection come back. I went to Summit, which is Children's Tumor Foundation host. And a lot of us go to Summit to have enough and the families, we all connect with one another. And I went to Summit and one of my friends, him and his mom are there. And he was his mom put up the music. I have this phone that does my technology. And I'm using my phone to read on my tablet. nonsense at me. And she's like, what is this? And I was like, oh, this is how I communicate. And I see her eyes like start like swelling up a little bit. And I'm like, look at her. And she's like, I haven't been able to talk to my son in 10 years. And I was like, well, how do you communicate with him? And she's like, we just text. And like, I still get like emotional about this. So like that like broke my heart and it made me realize there's so many of us that just don't have this connection. So I went on this mission of, if some people learn a little bit of sign language, they learn about deaf technology, if they learn how to communicate with a deaf person, if they learn all of this, it might be a little easier to kind of bridge that gap. So I took to social media, like everybody does, to spread awareness. And the community was great, is a lot of people are losing their hearing. It's just not NFT people. And so a lot of people are losing their hearing. But it's in the community, it's not just me. Like we're all in it together, which is amazing. And then I started working with Google last year on their deaf technology and everything. And I worked with a lot of captain glass companies. It's been awesome.
That's incredible. And how do you feel about the support you're getting from that social media community? So much in social media is so negative. If you work in politics like I do or in government, the amount of bad messages you get outweigh any good message anyone can ever give you. That's sort of the dark side of social media. But it seems like, generally speaking, you get so much support from the community at large in social media. How does that feel for you?
A lot of us go through this mental struggle of MF, and families that are affected, we have a lot of stress on ourselves in general. And so a lot of us go through all of this. We have all of this stress. So I was like, if I'm going to take on this additional stress of starting a social media platform, it has to be positive. The negativity, while it's there, you do get some, everybody gets some. I was like, I really want to build an audience that's supportive and support one another. But they surprised me. I wasn't expecting it. But everybody, for the most part, and of course, to get the comments every once in a while. But I've just been so lucky. Everybody, and they're all supportive towards one another. Like on my comment section, like they're all supporting each other. Like it's just great. Like I felt very blessed. I felt very fortunate just because I know how toxic social media could be. So it's been kind of a joy to be on there. And there's been times where I was stressed out or I'm feeling down and they've uplifted me. And so I'm just very grateful.
Yeah, it's tremendous. And it's really, like I said in the beginning, not a surprise for me knowing you before, but just so happy to see that side of you was not taken away with your hearing, because you've always been a powerhouse of a speaker, inspirational to so many people. And look at how you're advancing in so little time. You can follow her on social media, on Instagram. I think it's just at McKinnon Galloway. Is that right?
McKinnon Galloway.
Your social media following keeps growing. Your impact keeps growing. Anybody who meets you can't help but smile. Your ability to adapt to situations. I'm just thinking of being in North Carolina. We were driving through with my family on a road trip, and we met up with you and your mother at a diner for breakfast. And those who listen know I have 5 children. We had 5 people, all 7 of us sitting around the table, and McKinnon is sitting there with her phone, which tells her who's speaking and transcribing and keeping up with everybody. It was just an incredible thing, and we are in awe of you. And I'm so happy to give everybody a glimpse of the best of the NF community, and also a glimpse a little bit about what it means when someone's saying you're living with tumors on your nerves, and benign or not benign is an irrelevant term again. Just something that's so difficult, but it also builds resilience and strength, and that is what McKinnon Galloway represents. So McKinnon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, McKinnon. Everyone, please make sure to like, subscribe, follow. For those who listen to the whole podcast, be sure to follow up with whoever you need to follow up with, elected officials, decision makers. We need to figure out a way to save this medical research funding for NF. It's such a critical part of America. It's a critical part of helping Americans here in our country. And while we have to be responsible, we have to do so responsibly as well and make sure that we're making the right decisions. I suffer from being optimistic once again. I know we can do it. Please make the phone calls. Let's make it happen. And for everyone else, we'll see you next time.